All right, welcome to the May Eclectix the Book Club discussion of If the Light Works in Our Favor, The Fantasies of Future Things by Doug Jones. And we have the pleasure of having Doug join us today. So I'm going to give him some space and time to introduce himself and say a few words.
Cool. Dawnshaeé, thank you so much. I appreciate being here. I appreciate your members inviting me to join. I am Doug Jones. I live in Atlanta, from New York. Um, Great time writing this book. What happened to the screen?
Oh, I pinned you as like the spotlight. So
Okay.
the floor is yours. For the
Okay.
gun.
Um, I'm having, so the book came out on the 23rd of April, and I'm just having a really great time, talking to folks, going around, making different stops on the book tour, and being in conversation with people. Um, what else can I say by way of introduction? I am a Brooklynite. I moved to Atlanta in 2017. I have one question that I will answer right up front because I know everybody asks. Jacob is not me. um, this book is a book of fiction. I would say the emotion of the book, it might be a little bit autobiographical, but in terms of the actual experiences and happenings, the book is completely fiction, other than the fact that Atlanta did host the Olympics. So, um, yeah, that's about it. Happy to have answer questions and have conversations with everybody.
Okay. Well, we are happy to have you. It is one of those questions you want to know, like, are you the author in the book in any capacity? Were any of the characters, based off of your personal experience? So I'm glad you were able to tackle that right out the gate. But I still want to know, like, since we're already in the discussion of the characters, specifically Jacob, um, did you have like any trouble with creating Jacob or Daniel's character? And if so, what was your biggest challenge?
I think the biggest challenge was I didn't have any trouble um, creating them. I had difficulty with Jacob getting people to understand what his motivations.
Mhm.
And I would say my father, um, who read very, very early drafts of the book, and was just like, I don't understand this guy, Jacob. Like, why does he make the decisions that he makes? If he doesn't like his job, I'll just leave and go get another one. Like, what's all this drama about? Um, and so I really had to explain, I had to detail for readers what the stakes were, why he just could not leave the job, why he didn't feel comfortable and just leaving the job and just walking out and going to do something different. He was having a real dilemma about, these people are at stake, these people are at risk. I might have an opportunity to do something. What level of something am I going to do? What level am I willing to risk getting? So, with Daniel, Daniel came my internal struggle with Daniel was kind of to make sure I didn't go overboard with him. People understand that he's an emotional guy. He's brimming with a lot of anger, and I could not make him caricature. He just couldn't be this angry, lost, mixed race kid that was out here wilding out. I had to give him an anchor so people understood, what some of his issues were.
Yeah. And so like they both have very unique backgrounds. And like you mentioned like your father reading earlier drafts of this book, and we see these very two different fathers or father figures in their life. And so I is this a spoiler place? Can I do spoilers? Is this okay?
It's okay.
Is this spoiler okay? Okay, so the end, leaving it open for Daniel to not really confront Ralph Reed in that moment. What was your decision making like for that? Because I was like, so is it gonna be a book two? Am I gonna get a little bit more? Because now and this is just a personal thing for me. It's just like once because it's like, oh, I see a book less than 300 pages. I'm gonna fly through it. So I'm like flying through it, I'm flying through it. And then it's like you get to those final pages and it's just like, wait, come back. I need the characters back. So it's like we get a kind of a cliffhanger, if you will. Like Are we just supposed to leave it up to ourselves to figure out what happens with him, or will there be more?
There's not going to be a book two. Um,
I'm always hopeful.
but I think this is the way that life works, right? I think we get to answer some questions, and other questions are lingering and ongoing, and that's the way challenge works in our lives. And it also ties into the title of the book, "The Fantasies of Future Things."
Mhm.
What these characters are reaching for, what they're striving for, whether or not they fulfill it, or how much of it they get to fulfill, how much of their aspirations, how much of their dreams or their desires, the places which they come from, how do they fill out or fill in, those spaces. And I think, well, I'll speak from the I know in my own life personally, it's always a quest, that process of evolution, that process of creation or recreation is ongoing. It never stops. It never stops until we're not here. So leaving Daniel, the way he ruminates at the end, he is obviously he's going to take steps to get to know his father, but in a practical term, and it's not something that he would do right then, right? Because he's working for the man. Like, he pop up, "Hey, I'm your son," and like, "Oh, okay, you're fired." Like, so. It's just one of those things that he has to kind of work through, like that dilemma. And I think those are the choices that we all have to make. What's primary?
Mhm.
What takes precedence over something else? You know, right then he needed a job. That was his goal to
Yeah.
make him.
Yeah. And I think that was a beautiful way that you said that, like the need to fill the void, or like there's just like a space that we don't really have the answers to. And we see that with Jacob as well. Like, even like, oh, if I do tell my parents that I am a gay man, like how will they receive it? And like he receives a response that he wasn't really ready for or could prepare for. But I think even that conversation alone isn't something you can prepare for. You can't prepare for other people's responses. So I can see why leaving that at the end for Daniel to say, okay, my approach to this difficult conversation that I need to have with a parent, I'm going to put it on the back burner.
Mhm.
So that I 100% understand.
Yeah.
Um, I think I want to go into why you made it important to set the novel in Atlanta during the early 1990s. Why was that specific time frame important for you?
I think that so this novel evolved over a number of decades. um, and the original setting was very different. It was a workplace setting. It was very flat, very static, not too much going on. And in searching for situations that kind of rub up against each other, and situations that I think we all deal with and we can all identify with, like, again, what are the stakes? What's the friction here? What's the cost of what's happening? People being literally moved out of their homes to make way for something else, um, and to make way for this ideological thing that is supposed to be for the good of humankind, right? And it just isn't. Or is it? That's the question. Is it? And so I was looking for that sort of friction, to kind of rub up against each other. And because I went to Morehouse, and because I remember what happened during the Olympics, I mean, literally, the city paid, unhoused folks to leave. There were lots of things that were happening. The city knocked down public housing. There was all sorts of things that were going on. I was like, this is the environment. This is the clash. And these are things that we still see. I mean, it's going on right now.
Yeah.
This is what's happening. It's happening all over our country, and I think that people are constantly living in these situations, and trying to sort through. So that's what I was looking for. That's why I chose the 1990s, and then it had significance for me. I think also personally, coming of age at that time, coming into knowledge of my own sexuality, what the 90s meant for me. I mean, coming out of, well, we weren't coming out of it. We were just getting into it. The whole for black people, the black community, the whole HIV and AIDS crisis, even though that's not in the book itself, there's a small little reference about it. Um, but that was the beginning, for me, that was the beginning of the realization of that period of time.
Yeah. And I'm so glad you brought that up because I was wondering about that. Like if you debated with yourself on even including the HIV/AIDS epidemic during this time period, because I think that's what people expect to see, especially in a book set in the 90s. Like you expect that to be at the forefront, that's the theme. And so was that important to you to make sure that these two characters were able to display their queerness in a way that didn't center sexual health? Was that just something that just naturally didn't take place?
I would say they weren't centering sexual health because they didn't know about it. The primary thing was sexual identity for
Mm-hmm.
them at that point. And I went back and forth with my editor about that. He was like, no, but Magic Johnson, by that time he had already made his announcement. And, I was like, yeah, but that was for heterosexual people,
Mm-hmm.
right? That was like his announcement, sent heterosexual men running to the doctor to get tested. It was not sending black gay men. We were still in a quandary about who this was affecting and how it was affecting us because there was no education, there was no communication amongst ourselves, and there was no communication to us. So at that time, the primary issue was about sexual identity. So that's why there was no focus on um, HIV and AIDS. But to your earlier question, wait for the next novel. That
And I will be on the lookout for it because like I'm impressed. I'm impressed with this body of work. Like I didn't really know what to expect. I often go into books very blind. I have a few trusted people who are like, you should definitely read this book. And it's like, okay, you told me to read it. I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna see what it's about. So I feel like there were so many topics. There's so many topics around queerness that we can explore, period. And so even just the coming out moment, if you will, that's in the book, that I had to reread that a few times because I was just like, everyone's experience is very different. I am a Black bisexual woman, and my parents' response was just like, okay, girl, whatever. But then it's like you read other people's experiences, and it's just like, dang, it's not always sweet. It's not always a beautiful experience and it's not always welcoming. And so did you struggle at all with like putting Jacob back as a closeted gay man within the novel, or was that never?
No, I didn't struggle with that because I didn't perceive him to be closeted so much as I perceived him to be trying to figure out when it was time to quote unquote come out.
Mhm.
Um, and his Jacob's experience was very much my own experience with my family, my parents. But another point, this book, I wrote it. I wrote part of well, a reason that I wrote it was to see myself, was to see healing, heal myself, help contribute to the healing of my family, help contribute to the healing of families like mine, help contribute to our community. And it is accomplishing that because my mother read the book. My very conservative mother read the book, and she has come incredibly far. And this is a conversation that she and I had last week. She said, I understand so much. And she was like, I was never not going to read your book, Douglas. She calls me Douglas. I was never not going to read your book. You are my child, you are my son. I love you fiercely. Just because I don't say certain things doesn't mean I don't embrace you. and we just had an amazing conversation. I prayed and I thank God. I thank God after our conversation because I was like, I'm done. My father's no longer here, and my mother did something that if you had asked me 2 or 3 years ago, would she ever do that? Both of us would have said no.
Yeah.
And she came through that. And so I know because my mother, because it contributed to the healing and health, um, both individually and familially for me, that I know it can do that for other people. And this is one of the reasons I wrote the book. My father, when I feel like I'm taking over the conversation.
Oh no, this is your floor. This is
Okay.
your
All
floor.
right.
Please take it away.
Okay.
Best
My,
thing.
when I, my father and I, when I was still in grad school, um, we were having a conversation. This had to be in 97, 98. It was at a time when Toni Morrison, Terry McMillan, and Alice Walker were like dominating the bestseller lists.
Mhm.
And I said to him, we were talking. I was in grad school. I was at Columbia in grad school, um, and a different Columbia than the one that we know today. But anyway, that's where I was. And and I said, Dad, I was just struggling with the writing, with trying to get out the box, and like I was looking around for other Black male fiction writers, contemporary. And I said, where are our current, James Baldwins and Langston Hughes and Richard Wrights? And my father said, he's at the tip of your pen, right? He's at the tip of your pen. And I was like, and that blew me away because here was my father who also was not down for what I was writing, like what I was writing about, but knew that I had to write and pushed me and said, "You write." And and again, he read what I wrote, and he was just like, "I'm going to put some stuff over here, and some stuff I'm going to digest, and we can talk about." But he grappled with the work. He grappled with my work, and I'm so appreciative of that. I mean, the book is dedicated to him. I wish he was here, but both my mother and my brother is like, he is. He is watching. He sees. He understands. So I'm really a large part of this is about healing, and it's about writing into the community in which I'm. So yeah.
Yeah. And I think you successfully did that. That was one of the main reasons I did go with selecting this as a book club pick because we read Giovanni's Room back in August. And a lot of the book club members, especially for in person, they were just like, we wanted to see it from the angle of a Black gay man. Like in Giovanni's Room, it's not really explicit what their race is. It's still a phenomenal body of work, don't get me wrong. But a lot of people, because the book club only reads books by Black authors. So we're expecting and anticipating this underlying tone of racial identity within the book. So, like, are there any other like authors or people or role models within your life that helped you write this book? Because a book is never really a single-handed effort. There are
Right.
other minds that contribute to it. So would there be any other authors or role models aside from your parents and family that you would recognize?
Besides the obvious, Toni Morrison and James Baldwin, mother, father, and son was Randall Keenan for me. Besides those three, there are, do you know Essex Hemphill and other countries, Marlon Riggs, Joseph Beam? Are y'all familiar with their work?
No,
They
no.
were they were they were Black gay writers who came along in the 80s and the early 90s. Unfortunately, AIDS took them out just as they were getting started. Let me see, Brother to Brother, that was an anthology of gay men's writing. Um, then there was Sojourner. Other countries put those out. Then there was another anthology called Other Countries. There was one called In the Life. Um, it, incredible, incredible writers. And they constructed when I encountered them. a friend of mine, straight man, straight brother, gave me the first volume of Other Countries. And I devoured that in like a night. And I was just like, as I had questions about my sexuality, but at the time in the late 80s, all that was on TV, all that you could see was white gay men
Mhm.
everywhere. Like that was I didn't see black gay men. There wasn't a community that I could identify until he gave me this book. And when he gave me this book, not only did it introduce me to incredible writers, it also introduced me to these black gay men who were constructing black gay identity,
Mhm.
and I was just like, wow, this is something like if they can do it, I can do it. Like if they can live, I can live, you know. But again, unfortunately, a lot of them succumb to AIDS. So that's not and that's why they're not around. And we lost their body of work. But there are incredible books out there. But to answer your question, I write in the tradition of those writers.
Yeah, I wrote them down so that I can check them out after this because I want to explore more. I feel like getting to know you as an author allows me to get a better understanding of your work. Um, and so being able to go look at those books and check them out will help me understand the fantasies of future things as I ponder more on it in your forthcoming book whenever we get that. um, let's see. I want to make sure we get through the questions that I sent over to you. And um, um going through because I know we hopped around quite a bit.
No, that's okay.
Um, so how did you decide to tell the story in dual perspective?
Well, that okay. So when I read that question, I was like, that'll be a long conversation. So initially, the book was written. Jacob was written in first person present,
Mhm.
and Daniel was written in third person past.
Mhm.
The reason for that was I wanted people when you read Jacob, I wanted people to experience the immediacy of what Jacob was experiencing. His emotions, responding in the moment, his anger, his desire, his anxiety. Right? I wanted people to experience that through. I wanted the reader to experience that immediately. And then with Daniel, I wanted folks to have a more analytical perspective, to be able to look at the breadth and scope of how he lived, of where his mother was, of what his experiences are, and be able to dissect and kind of say, okay, well, him being biracial and being trapped in these circumstances, how did that lead him to where he is now in that context? The challenge that I was having was that there was a certain emotional weight that was missing, and just in terms of use of language, um, character development, momentum, moving through the novel, perspective, the reader's perspective, identifying, you know, kind of plot points and building climax and things like that, working up. And so Yadon and I, he made the decision for me that um, the book should be recast into all of it as third person. And it's at times, it can be a very close third person. But that also allowed me entry into the character in a different way and also enabled me to kind of shift and move things and show the reader from different angles what was happening with different characters. And then also I could answer the question about how to relay certain information to the reader because it's third person voice. I wasn't restricted to, well, this character can't know this because it's first person. All of a sudden, the omniscient third person, like, okay, this character, we can navigate around here. We could relay information because this was in third person, because it was omniscient voice. So that's how that was the transition.
Okay. I feel like I feel like I could tell that Jacob's character came first.
Mm.
Or am I right?
Jacob's character did come first. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was just like I felt more. I feel like that initial experience of you writing Jacob in first person really like allowed me to become attached to Jacob.
Hmm.
Maybe even just your father's feedback on like not really understanding Jacob's why
Hmm.
really allowed me to relate more to him and get a better understanding. But Daniel was also very well like fleshed out. And so whenever a book is giving me two very strong main characters, I tend to try to figure out a favorite. So I was wondering if by chance you had a favorite.
I do have a favorite, and it's neither one of them.
Hmm.
My favorite character is Daniel's mother because
Hmm.
she's the character I knew the least about.
Yeah.
Um, and she was the character that I wanted to make the most human. Um, and she had despicable moments, right? I mean, she's whooping, Daniel's ass and the things that she did to Miss Anderson in that room, but then in the principal's office. But then you also understand she's a victim as well. She's a real victim of her circumstances, and I think my goal with her was to make sure that she was as human as possible, that I did not rob her of any of that, and so that the reader would step in and be like, you know what, I understand this person, I understand, and I identify. And I said to myself after that, when I wrote that principal scene, I was like, if all black women read that and hate me, then I have missed the mark. But if I can have at least 50% of sisters be like, I'm down with Sue Ellen because she came for my kid, and I don't she overstepped, then I was doing okay. And so far, I'm doing okay.
Yeah, I think you're way past 50% because it's like that's a mother moment. You're gonna protect your kids, and it's also like there's a male in the household and she's already struggling and fight for her life. And it's like the last thing she needs is someone else who is supposed to be a figure in her children's life making her look worse
Mm-hmm.
than what she needs to look or what she has to look because mothering is already hard by
Mm-hmm.
itself. And so then it's like, now I have this woman at school that I need to go address. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, I think that was just a very Southern moment.
Mm.
I feel like it captured like, don't play with my baby cubs. Don't play with them. Like
Right.
regardless of what you think, it was inappropriate. And I think it speaks a lot to like not even just it being a black woman, or as a teacher, like speaking on it. It's just like how the education system, like we have to really like think about that. Like, how are these teachers engaging with our children? What
Right.
impact are they having with them?
Right. Right. Right.
So
That she could feel so at liberty that she could say whatever popped up in her head or out of her mouth. People like, no, you can't do that. Yeah.
yeah. I could see why some people may have other thoughts about it, but it's just like, no, look at the bigger picture. Look at the entire dynamic. Um, and so even with Daniel's mother, I really couldn't gauge if the relationship she had with Mr. Ralph was consensual. Like if it was like a hidden love, or if it was like, is this a by any means like I need to pay the rent or I need XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the only thing I was left with by the end of the book where I was just kind of unsure. And I was okay. I'm okay either way because it still speaks to like her determination as a mother, but it could also speak to her having almost a slice of peace or a slice of love in her life that she wasn't receiving from her husband.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Is that you're asking me a question then?
yeah. So like, which one is it?
They were truly in love with each other. Um, but it was circumstance. I mean, this is the deep South.
Mhm.
This is, late well, at that point, it was early 70s, late 60s. They're just coming out of the civil rights era, volatile, um, black man, white woman, and they were just trying to survive.
Yeah.
They were not trying to upset the social order. Um, she Ralph Reed just moved to Atlanta for all this opportunity. He was not leaving to go someplace else. Um, Sue Ellen was not in a position to leave and go anywhere at all, and it's just fate. I mean, they truly loved each other, but it was one of those things where they couldn't navigate their circumstances, so they came together, for the little time that they did. And, when it got out of hand and when Sue Ellen's husband, challenged the situation, she had to make a decision.
Yeah.
She made a decision that she was going to go with her children. She was not going to tempt fate at all.
Thank you for clearing that up for me because I was just like, I'm rooting for her either way. Like, I'm okay, an understanding of what she's doing, but I just wanted to make sure
Yeah.
on my
And
own.
I think that's I appreciate you saying that, Dawnshaeé, because that is also a very contemporary read of that, right? Of
Mhm.
that situation is very contemporary, and no one, you're the first person who's asked that question. Um, and I can see how and why that would be a question, you
Mhm.
know, and a significant one too. Yeah. So thank you.
Thank you for answering because I was just like, should I ask? But I just
Yeah,
needed the peace of mind while I have you on the line. I just need.
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Um, so I know I said like 30 minutes, but I do have one more question.
Mhm.
So it was like during Sherman and Jacob's like first date, there was like this discussion of like black men seeking out spaces to be vulnerable. And I was just curious, like, what was the first place or time that you felt that level of freedom to be all that you are?
Ooh, wow. Wow.
That should have been in my email probably, but yeah. I was just like thinking back because like I was tabbing and then I was like, let me send you all the ones that I already have. And then I was like going through what I tabbed and I was just like the conversation, like it was kind of like repetitive, but in a very well done way, just like what it meant for a black man to fully exist. And so,
You know what? I think I still struggle with it to be truly free and be all that I think I'm constantly. uh, I mean, can we have an honest moment? We're talking, right? So I just met somebody,
ooh,
um, and I don't know where it's going, right? But I am conscious of what not to say,
yeah,
right? I'm like, okay, if I say this, then he might ascertain that I'm kind of digging him, and then he got a leg up, and then I'm gonna lose my footing. I'm gonna lose my leverage later on. So like, let me protect myself. Like, you know what I'm saying? It's just
yeah.
like,
It's like you want to put yourself out there, right?
right.
'Cause I feel like I'm in a similar position. And it's just like, I want to be vulnerable, like I want to let you in, but it's just like I've done this before. I'm also like very fearful. I'm like, I can't say I love you first. I won't do it. I can't do it before I can't do it. But it's just like that tug of war. Like you want to have that safe space. And I think like even though that this book is specifically our main characters are black gay men, I feel like anybody can relate to that feeling of wanting to be somewhere and be all that they are and just exist and feel that. So I was wondering if you had ever felt that way before because I feel like both Daniel and Jacob are like yearning for that space. They're both like seeking it out and uh, it's it it's just like have you had the chance to find that space before or in someone or in a physical space, like, or a city,
Yeah,
anywhere?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I will tell you. I mean, to take the conversation in a different. I'm sorry. Were we at the end of that conversation? Like that was a rhetorical question at the end of that, right?
Oh, yeah, it was rhetorical. Yeah.
Okay, that was okay. So, so I can tell you very clearly when I lost agency,
Hmm.
right? And I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my father, I, you know, fathers and sons, right? I used to follow my father everywhere. Like if my father was going out the door, I could be playing with some fire truck, and fire truck would just drop into the middle of the floor, and I'm like going to trump after my father wherever he's going. And so that was one of those moments. He he was jingling his keys around. I was like, "Oh, Daddy, where you going?" He's like, "Come on, let's go." Boom, let's go. So we out in the car, and it was a route that he took to the barbershop that was etched in my brain because I hated going to the barbershop. And he took that route and he pulled around. It wasn't that far from my house. It was like maybe a few blocks. This is growing up in Brooklyn, in Flatbush. And he hit the corner off of Parkside and he turned onto Empire Boulevard. And I was like, Daddy, you tricked me. Like you knew if I knew that you were going to the barbershop, I wouldn't have come. He's like, yeah, yeah, okay, So come on, let's go get your haircut. So we're in the barbershop, right? And this is a black barbershop. Like this is everything black men barbershop. This it 70s. This is what that is. And I remember very clearly the barber made a great big show of because they knew who I was. And I get my haircut. So he made a show of dusting off his chair and putting a little booster seat, on the arms of the barber's chair. He's like, all right, young blood, you up. And I turned around and I said in my little boy voice, I said, oh, I'm not getting my haircut because my father tricked me into coming here and he knows I want to get my haircut. So, next person, y'all go ahead and do your thing. And I remember, you know, the men in the barbershop just like looking at me, right? And my father's like looking at me, and he's like, Doug, at that time, he called me Dougie. Doug, get your butt in the chair. You're gonna get your hair cut. And I remember being enraged. Like, this is my body, it was my hair, and I couldn't do what I wanted to do with my hair. And I remember I was crying, and the barber was trying to cut my hair, and I kept hunching my shoulders up so he couldn't get to my head. And my father said, well, he stepped back and he was just like, he looked at my father. He was like, "What you want me to do?" And my father stood up and he just made a great show, like he was getting ready to take off his belt. And of course, I sat up and I was just like, ugh. And I remember saying, if I had been born, of course, I didn't know anything about the birds and the bees then, but I said, if I had been born big, I could do what I want to do and I wouldn't be getting my hair cut. And he told me not to talk. And I just remember that was like it just was in my head. And so that is another thing that you're going to see at some future point. Like, 'cause it was just such a loss of this is what it means to not be able to control yourself. Like I could not control my head getting cut.
Yeah.
Simplest thing in the world. I didn't have that ability. I didn't have that agency. So, and I remember very distinctly when I lost it. Your former question, I'm a tussle with that because I think as we just said, yeah, I tussle with that. I tussle with
Can
that.
I add to that question?
Sure.
Hi, I'm Sarah, she, her. I was just thinking, based on what Dawnshaeé said, was there a space, and that, like you live in Atlanta now, but you're from Brooklyn. Is there or was there a physical space? We hear so much about like Stonewall and how that was such a refuge, or was there a space that you could go to as you were coming up? Like, was there a space at Morehouse? Was there a space at Columbia? Like those big, like defining places in your history, or even now with everything being so still so scary and volatile. Is there a, I know that I can go and be here and this, like I tell my own children, um, when we see that rainbow flag, even though we are not a LGBTQ family, we're a biracial family. So when you see the progressive flag, that's just a one clue, one hint that it's it's safer than not having anything.
Mm,
Um, and especially they know the difference between, with the new black brown pieces
like,
into it.
mhm, mhm.
Um, but was there anything as you were coming up that you can think of that was like your safe haven or even now?
I think there was not physical space. There are emotional spaces that I have. Those are my friendships, um, and that I feel safest with people who I've built relationships with over time. I don't know that there is and that's an interesting question, Sarah, because I'm a pretty big guy, um, and I, I don't, I don't think of my, I don't think of my physical self being in danger, if that makes any sense, right? I do think of my emotional self being in danger, um, being threatened in the way that Dawnshaeé and I were just talking about. Um, but I really don't think of the only time I thought of my physical self being in danger. I was working for a small bank in Birmingham when I first got out of college, and we would travel around the South. And this is in the this is in the early '90s, right after I got out of school, and I was I was very conscious of where I was because of the type of work I was doing, and because we were in the South, and because I was Black. That was the time that I became conscious of my physical self and safety. That was probably the only time. Most other times, I'm again because I feel like it's the comfort of I don't know. It might be just it might be several things. It's being male, it's being Black, it's being of a certain size. I don't and there are situations like even I'm conscious of when I'm interacting if I have to interact with the police. I have not had any negative interactions with the police, but I haven't had any interactions with the police either. Right. So that's so those things I really have not thought about safety in that way and physical safety in that way. What I've thought about is my emotional safety. Yeah. Did that answer the question?
It did. I was just thinking about this new potential relationship that you're going into and how the intersection of both your blackness and your gayness and where you would maybe feel unsafe or just my the people that I'm close with when they go and they say, "Ooh, do we hold hands here? Do we go to this romantic, like well-known romantic restaurant?" Like, do you have those ideas now and think, or my friend who recently got married, and she was like, "Ooh, do you plan?" My husband's from North Carolina. She's like, she's Asian and she's Chinese and her husband's Indian. She's like, "Do you plan when you drive down there?" I was like, "Absolutely." We have to consciously think about like what stops. But for you now going into this newness and we're in 2025, you're in Atlanta most of the time, but I can assume in Brooklyn sometimes. Where does that come into play?
Yeah, I would say I think about physical safety and Blackness in the South. I
Mhm.
don't really think about it in the North. Although perhaps I mean, we probably should all think about,
Herself.
non-normative safety in place, particularly now. I mean,
Hmm.
we could talk for another 2 hours, right? But whole nother subject. Anyway, but I think about my physical safety. I do think more about in certain places in the South versus being in the North. Particularly when I first moved down here, I was very, very conscious of, I was made to be conscious of the way in which I spoke and the way I navigated in southern spaces versus in northern spaces. I moved back down to Atlanta in 2017 after living in New York. After I came back after school, I came back to New York for graduate school from 1996 to 2017. And so I had a certain level of, I mean, it's New York, you know, so, and New York is very much a bubble. New York is extremely, there's conservative places there, but they're, most part, it's mostly liberal. And I know I can talk a certain way in most places in New York, and, you know, people's eyebrows really not going to raise. Yeah, whatever, same whatever. But Atlanta's a very different place.
Yeah. I was thinking of like Lorette's or Loretta's that they had went to within the book. So
Mhm.
if maybe you had like any spaces like that um that you may frequent now. But I did want to touch on Jacob's friendships because you said like now that we know that your emotional vulnerability is like something that you do have to protect. Do you have any like long-term friendships like from Morehouse that you still converse with or that influence those characters?
I think that um, Sean and Rodney are based on, well, Sean and Rodney, they're again fictitious characters, but they're based on the types of friendships that I have that have survived with me. You
Hmm.
know, that they shelter one another, not just Sean and Rodney, but the three of them.
Yeah,
You know, I have five very close friends like that, and we're ride or die, and I'm physically and emotionally safe with them.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and
I
so
love I do love that. It's very good to have that support because even just that, I call it like the baby gay moment for Jacob when Sean is like being very protective of him and it's just like, do not take that first drink. Do not take that first drink. Do not be crazy. Like it was just like a very protective nature of your friend. And it's just like, I see like oh these different I guess if you will male to male representations within the book. Like it was very central. It was very like in your face. Like these are the dynamics, and that I also like that it was just like two black gay men can just be friends. Like people like just because we like the same sex does not mean we're attracted to one another. And having that example was very important for me, like to the story and how I processed it. Um, and so I'm gonna have our final question so that I can let you go enjoy the rest of your evening. But one question I sent your way was if your readers could only take away one important lesson or revelation for the fantasies of future things, what do you hope that would be?
just one.
One. I know.
I want it to be the healing factor.
Mhm.
I want it to be the healing factor. I hope that the book contributes to the healing of individuals, of families, of communities. That's what I want. I think if we can heal ourselves, if we are healing in that way, that we can navigate things.
Yeah. And I think you did that. Speaking for myself, I think you did that because like we see the once once Jacob and Daniel really took a look at themselves, they was able to make a better decision about the role they were playing within the community
Thank
and
you.
how they were showing up. So I think you did a phenomenal job, like getting that across to readers, especially for me. So I
Thank
do appreciate that. I do appreciate that. I feel like there were so many things to take away, but I wanted to make it hard on you and say, just give us one. Just there was a lot to take away
you. Yeah.
and based off
Can
our
I ask one follow-up question,
day.
please, based on that? Now I have little Dougie in my head at 5 years old, not having consent from getting his hair cut. Um, and this healing process, just wanting to know where in your writing, like your process as a writer or just as yourself, did you feel like you got that autonomy back when you were like, oh, now that I'm 10, I can say no to a haircut. It doesn't have to be a haircut, but where was the time that you were like, um, big enough?
No, no, I think that's what we were. I think that's what we were discussing earlier with Don Shay. Like, I think that process, that loss of innocence, um, I, I think I'm constantly reaching for that, like that emotional safety, that permission to just go all the way, to just be vulnerable and release and, engage new and interesting situations without regard to what's going to happen. I don't know that. I don't know. Yeah, yeah. I think that's something that I'm still working towards. I think that's the condition. Again, this is the I talking. I think that's the condition of adulthood. I think we're certain. I think we are more fearless and more engaging as children um, than we are in our adulthood.
I agree. I do agree with that. Yeah. I think as long as you're working towards it, I think it speaks to what you delivered within the fantasies of future things of like healing is an active journey. Like it doesn't, you don't just, I don't think we ever just get healed. You're constantly healing. You're constantly working towards a version of yourself. Like, granted, we'll never be our wild and free spirited, like childlike selves completely, but we can strive daily. I think even just engaging in like continuing to pursue your book, for example, and getting that out there is a fearless act. It is a resistance of even just a resistance against yourself to give up or just what other people may think. Like you're constantly doing things and putting yourself in a position to be vulnerable. Because writing a book is not easy. You're putting yourself in a space where we see how the publishing industry is. It's not always nice, it's not always kind, especially to Black authors. So I'm glad that you are actively doing the things to create autonomy. And this debut was your first feat within this specific sphere. So I'm proud of you if that counts for anything. I think you're doing great and reclaiming your autonomy. So,
Thank you both. Thank you all three, I should say. Yeah.
yes. If no one else has any questions, I'm gonna let Doug free to his evening, and then we'll have like our cool little 5 minute debrief. But I do want to say thank you so much, Doug, for joining us and talking with us.
Don Shay, Betty, and Sarah, thank you all for having me. I do appreciate it. This has been a lot of fun.
Of course, I'll send the recording. But thank you, and good luck to your future.
All right, thank you. Y'all have a good one.
You too. Bye bye.